Hi, Scotty.
Hi, Ivan. How are you going?
What on earth are you doing?
Well, I've been banging on about that book for a while, the one that I sort of written and, or at least is in a state of a work in progress, probably has been for the last 40 years. Well, I'm looking at possibly finalising it and asking a few critical friends to see what they think about it.
What is it about?
Well, first impressions, you might just think it's to some of you, familiar yarns about when I was a young lad in Glasgow and subsequently in Troon, and the sort of contrasting lives that I had in these places. But it's also, as I sort of on reflection realised, it's also about what it meant to be Scottish back then and how different these days were. So there's a bit of an identity and sort of culture component in there without trying to get too academic about it.
So this is your memoir. Why bother?
Okay, it's not my memoir because I'm not a famous person. I'm trying to use the 9-year-old boy as a vehicle for looking at the world or Scotland as it represented itself back then, trying to make sense of it. What does it mean to be a good Scottish 9-year-old? What about some of these sort of contradictions, like the sort of smack first and ask questions later type model that was used for parenting and in the education system? What about the fact that on one hand people in Scotland tended to sort of say they were patriots and fly the flag at the soccer games and the rugby games and so on, but would quite casually damage the environment by throwing chemicals away or carelessly or storing chemicals in an irresponsible way, or, as we are about to discover in some of my stories, worse than that. There seemed to be a very flippant attitude towards the environment back then. We could say it was something to do with the war. And
you are trying to do back to the past, not back to the future. So why should young people and your friends come along with the ride?
I think it's the vive la différence thing. People they won't believe it. I've had to sort of cross-check my facts with a lot of older people just to square it up with their experiences. The contrast between now and then is massive, and in fact it's quite frightening and shocking in some respects. My adventures as a child, or as I describe them anyway, with all those limitations, look like something from Queen Victoria's time compared to today. Everything has changed. Everything.
Scottish independence is coming up again all the time. And with your story mixing in, what does your 2 cents mean? And do you think if you drop it into the Clyde River, is it going to make a big splash out of it?
Okay, walking on very, very dangerous territory here, because I'm somebody who's been conspicuously absent from the country for the last, as in Scotland, for the last 35 years, living in Australia. And some people might take offence to the idea of me commenting on issues of national sovereignty and so on. The book doesn't take itself that seriously. Basically, it does have a little bit of a go at armchair patriotism. It's almost like you should have to pass a patriotism proficiency test. For instance, knowing the second verse to Flower of Scotland, as well as some of the points that I bring out in the book about that sort of contrast between being a patriotic Scottish person and casually throwing litter into the river.
What is your book aiming for? Who is it aiming towards? And finally, why should we give a damn?
Okay. Well, it started off as a reasonably innocent, what I call private history. That way I call it fiction, and that covers a lot of contingencies in terms of any legal action or anything or any other forms of offence people might take. A fatwa against me, perhaps like Rushdie. I'm getting a wee bit ahead of myself there. It would almost be a compliment. But the point is this, that it is quietly controversial. It's not intended to be. It's just sort of started to write itself into unavoidable controversial issues.
You try to make sense of it all, but it's been a long time ago, more than 50 years ago. So why should people bother? Why give a damn?
That's very true. Well, I think because of the sharp contrast to today and the sort of algorithm-determined society that we live in, it's a lot more visceral. It's a lot more personal. People laugh, people cry. I laughed and cried when I was writing it, and I'm kind of hoping that I can maybe shine a little bit of sunshine into people's souls, I suppose, because we're living in a somewhat soulless age. So that I'm quietly hoping that might happen with a few of the readers.
So it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think a lot of people will find it quite testing in some respects, but hopefully getting a very, very good laugh, because if they're not in that book or represented in that book, somebody they know is, and there's the #1 selling point for any publication.